Welcome back to Smite Guides. Today we're talking about Ao Kuang. We're going to go over his abilities as well as his builds. We'll talk about his roles a little bit. Ao Kuang is super popular right now. You're going to see him everywhere. Maybe not in ranked because he gets insta-banned every time, but if you are able to get him through in ranked, he's a monster. He is the king of the jungle right now next to like Thanatos and probably, well, I would say Fenrir, but Fenrir is starting to fall off now that the Bluestone nerf took into effect. But definitely Ao Kuang, Thanatos are the kings in the jungle right now. That's why you see them insta-banned in ranked gameplay and competitive gameplay. But he is nasty. Just in general right now, ADC mages are nasty. I did say back in Season 9 when I was doing these videos that the ADC mages didn't do too well compared to hunters, and they found a way about going to get that to work. This new Cyclopean ring is nasty. It's basically Quisai for mages, which is really nice to have. So it makes him that much better. He was already really good as it is. We'll go into his abilities first off. His passive is Dragon's King Sword, which is the sword that you see above his little avatar there in the bottom left. It has 3 charges on it, max of 3 stacks. You get a stack every 10 seconds. So in order to activate his passive, you just have to hit an enemy god with an ability. Any ability, as long as it's a damaging ability, will trigger his passive. All of your abilities technically can be used as damaging abilities, though his one, not so much. This will refund 2 seconds to any damaging ability that hits an enemy god as long as you have a stack available. Really good if you have max stacks entering into a fight. And we'll talk about how you can kind of use this in order to get max stacks multiple times in a fight and combo off him very well. So we'll talk about his dash real quick before we get too deep into his passive, just so that I'm not showing off his abilities without going into them too much. His dash is basically just a teleport that he does, leaving a clone behind him, putting him in stealth for about 5 seconds. He'll come out of stealth if he hits an enemy god or if he reactivates the ability, which will detonate the clone that he leaves behind, dealing damage to anybody within that circle. His 2 is dragons that he summons around him. He summons 6 dragons. You can fire these off in a line attack, or you can hit an enemy god and this will fire them off individually. Each and every single one of them will do additional magical damage to whoever you're hitting, and it is a lot of damage. It's his primary damaging ability next to his ultimate, which is mainly used for an execute or just laning someone out if you're trying to get someone separated from a fight, or take them out long enough for your team to catch up. That's really good for his ultimate, but we'll talk about that here in a second. But mainly you're going to use that just for basics. You can use it as a last second damaging ability if someone's a little too far away and you can't catch up and you want to hit them with it. It does plenty of damage, and it also applies, I believe, a 30% slow, if I'm correct. Yeah, 30% slow for 1 second. Now, after you hit that slow, if you do the line attack, it's just going to be 1 second. But if you use the ability where you're hitting them with your basics and doing it, every single time you hit them with the dragon, it's going to increase the cooldown for the slow by 0.25 seconds. So you can actually increase that above the 1 second threshold if you're doing it with multiple dragons throughout the entire thing. His 3 is basically just a carbon copy of like Hebo. His 2, I believe, whatever Hebo's cone attack is, it does a lot of damage. It's really good and not gonna hit multiple people, but really good damage if you're trying to finish someone off. It's also very quick on the refund, so you can do this over and over again in a fight, especially if you have your passive, in order to really bring someone down. Really good if you're trying to like really melt down a tank of someone of that sort as well. So that's his 3 main abilities. Now, how they work with the passive, as you can see, I don't know if you noticed during the combat, but as you hit someone with a damaging ability, it's going to consume one of those stacks and refund 2 seconds to that ability, also healing you by 5%. And then also you can use your execute on your dragon, which is your little cone attack that you put out in front of you. If someone's at the threshold of under 30% max health, then you can execute them instantly. Think Thanatos ult, and then, but right to the face, and then you turn into a dragon in the sky and you can choose where you land. If they are not underneath the 30% threshold, then you'll just send them into the sky for a few seconds and then they'll land back on the ground. Think Kumbhakarna ult. That's another one to compare it to. I will show you kind of what this looks like in both ways. First, we'll talk about how it looks if they're at the 30% threshold. You'll get this X, and then you just go into your dragon form, you execute them, and you can choose where to land. When you do an execute, you get your full passive stacks back, so you can use your execute in the middle of a fight after you used all your passive, and then get that back and be able to use it again. It also does damage when you land, and it heals you, I believe it's 30%. Is it 30%? Yeah, 30% of your maximum health at max level you get healed as well if you get the execute off. Your landing damage is pretty substantial as well, so that's nice to see. So we'll go into what it looks like if you ult someone when they're not at the threshold. We just need to reduce our cooldowns real quick, or reset our cooldowns is a better way of going about it. Where we at? There we are. reset our cooldowns, and we'll go over here and show you what it looks like if they're not at the threshold. So if they're not at the threshold, again, you're just going to skyrocket them up. Gives you enough time to kind of let your team catch up, or if you're just trying to zone someone out of the fight, maybe their front line for a second so that we can get to their damage, stuff like that. But basically you just throw them up in the air and then they'll come back down and land. It doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but it's enough to, it's a good zoning ability, I'd say. Really good for like if you're playing a support Ao Kuang, which you don't see often, but I think does really well as to use that as well, because he guys is slow and then he has his ultimate for execute, so you can still take people out at low health. They're really good at securing. So that is his full abilities, pretty straightforward. We'll get into his builds real quick. His builds are very straightforward as well, especially in Season 10 is really nice on Ao Kuang. We'll talk about where we would go in the jungle. So for jungle, starter item is going to be Protector of the Jungle, just because of that attack speed boost to the late game. Plus 35% attack speed is really good. You get a little bit of protections and then some magical power, which is necessary. And then while you're in the jungle, you get 15% power and 12% protection. So this is going to be his starter almost every single time. In the jungle, you can play around with the magical items in the jungle as well if you wanted to go. I wouldn't say Conduit Gem, though it's starting to become a little bit more popular since the buff. I would say probably Sands of Time and Pendulum of Ages you could play around with as a starter in the jungle if you wanted to. And I'm not necessarily counting out Boombas into maybe Boomba Spear, though I think Eye of the Jungle is stronger because you are going to go an attack speed build on Ao Kuang. So I think this is a really good build for him. And then going into his rest of his core kit, we got Telkine's Ring, which is the merger between Ring of Hecate and Telkine's Ring for Season 10. It gives you lifesteal, your basic attacks deal bonus damage of 10 plus 3 per level, so a max of 70 bonus damage on your basic attacks, which is really nice. You get that base amount of attack speed as well as some magical power. Then you're going to go into Nimble's Bancroft's Town, which I think is really strong on ADCs right now. This gives you an additional 2% attack speed for every 40 magical power you have, which is going to pair nicely with the rest of our build as we get into the later game. Cyclopean Ring, which is the new one I talked about. This is basically Quisai for mages. Anybody 8% of the target's maximum health, you're going to deal bonus magical damage to, so that's really nice to have. And then you also get a big boost in magical power, some more attack speed, and cooldown reductions, which is nice on Ao Kuang's kit. You're already getting cooldowns for his passive. A little bit more doesn't hurt anything. Typhon's Fang is the magic sauce for this build, just because you're getting magical lifesteal from Telkine's Ring, magical lifesteals from Nimbles, and this basically doubles the magical lifesteal that you have and converts it into power. You also get 25% increased lifesteal, which is nice to have. You get 200 mana, 70 magical power, magical lifesteal, and magical penetration. And then, like I said, it takes this 40 lifesteal that you have, doubles it to 80, and converts that into power. So it's a nice little power spike. And then the final item is going to be Rod of Tahuti, which makes your basic attacks and your abilities gain 25% additional magical power against targets below 50% health. So this pairs up well with Cyclopean Ring when you're trying to melt out the tanks and the warriors in the late game. So this is a really strong build. This is going to be his bursty build. I do have a tank build that I mess around with Ao Kuang a little bit. You can do this build in the jungle. I think it works just fine. You could also play around in the solo lane with this. But if you were going to build it in the jungle, you'd probably still keep Cyclopean Ring. You'd probably build Cyclopean Ring really early, though you can build it late. It's not necessarily a one set. You don't have to build it first, though this is your primary attack speed in the build, so you kind of want to build it at some point, probably in the first 3 items. And then the next one is probably going to be just your typical attack speed bruiser build. So you're going to go into Berserker Shield and Shogun's, which is magical, and that'll give you attack speed. You also get Berserker, so when you're underneath 50% health, you become a Berserk for 5 seconds, giving you 10% damage mitigation and 20% attack speed, which is really nice. And then you get the base amount of attack speed as well in your physical prots and health. You also get Shogun's Kasari, which is magical protections, and then all units or all allied gods within 70 units of you have increased attack speed, as well as yourself. And then they also work off of each other as good sustain. You get HP 5 from Berserkers, and you get MP 5 from Shoguns, so they work really well. And then you get your cooldowns from Shoguns as well. Another one that I think is really strong on him is Stone of Binding, especially if you're going into a tanky build. If you hit somebody with a crowd control ability, you'll place a debuff on them, reducing their physical and magical protections by 5, plus 1 per level in the late game, so 25 total. And then this is really nice paired up with Cyclopean Ring against the tanks in the late game again, which is really nice. And then the final item is probably going to be, since the buff, Archdruid's Fury, which is going to be really nice. I think it was buffed. It was either, I don't know, they made a change to it in 10.1. I still think it's strong if you're building an attack speed based god, or a basic attack god anyway. I think it's really strong on Surtur right now, but we don't have to talk about him because anything on him is strong right now. But Druid's Fury is really nice. You gain a stack up to 6 each time you take damage from enemy gods equal to 5% of your maximum health. Your next basic attack on an enemy god consumes all the stacks and deals 30 plus 1.5 per level magical damage per stack. This is huge. It's basically like a poly hit, except it's a little bit stronger. Poly hits pretty hard. I'm sure you could fit a poly into one of these builds. You could fit in the last build, maybe sub out an item, though I think the last build is pretty strong. But this is like a tanky bruiser build for Ao Kuang. So that goes into builds for Ao Kuang. Again, I think he's really strong right now. Obviously, he's super popular. You're not going to get him through in any ranked games right now. He's insta-banned because of how strong his kit is. Execute gods are just tend to be super strong no matter where they are and no matter what season. Because having that insta, if you're at low health, you're dead no matter what you do unless you have sync or you are able to dodge out. Especially with Ao Kuang, seeing is that there's really no dodging it. If he gets on top of you, if you don't have your sync or your beads ready and you're not quick about it, he's going to get you. With Thani, it's a little bit more technical. You can dodge out his ultimate, which is a little bit weird, but Ao Kuang pretty much latches onto you and instas you if he gets close to you at that 30% threshold. So Ao Kuang, super strong, very bursty mage, really fun to play, especially with that ADC type build. So I think he's interesting. I hope you guys enjoyed the guide. I hope it was pretty quick and something informative for you guys to get a hold of Ao Kuang and be able to play him in a way that makes you feel comfortable. If you guys are enjoying the content, I do appreciate subs. They let me know that I'm doing well and let me know that you plan on coming back. Likes on video also do the same thing. It lets me know that you like a specific video. And then also commenting anything below that lets me know how I can do better with my content or what content you are liking and would like to see more. This has been The Bright Cry, and I hope you enjoyed the guide.